Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order on Tuesday, March 27th at 9 a.m. Would you please join me in a pledge of allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Ma'am, would you like to move things forward?
One more button to push.
It's not recognizing me.
We keep trying and nothing happens.
We're up to 70, 18. Laura, could you repeat?
I did, but I'll do it again.
Thank you.
We did it about 3 times.
We have 19 present, 2 absent. Presentation of the agenda.
What's the question?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Correspondence. Maybe any correspondence they'd like to add? In the packet, you see the unassigned fund balance. Public comment. Does anybody care to make a comment? Please come forward, state your name, please.
Use this mic.
Yes, that'd be great.
Good morning. I'm Dick Baldwin. I'm born and raised in Sturgeon Bay. I live in the town of Sevastopol. And I came here this morning to talk about the possibility of this group supporting a safe harbor / launch ramp in Whitefish Dunes Park. I've got a lot of things I'd like to say about the logistics of it and so on, but in the interest of time, I'll just say that we have nothing between Sturgeon Bay and Bailey's Harbor as a safe launch. And from the standpoint of emergency, it's a need, and recreationally, it would be a highly used facility. There's been some work done on elevations for water depth and the transition from the water up to a parking lot in Whitefish Dunes Park. And it makes sense for a ramp there, we think. And the DNR now is under the process of changing the master plan system from, in the past, each property, each state-owned property would have its own standalone master plan. Well, now they're grouping it all together. Several counties in the Lake Michigan watershed will have one master plan. So instead of each one having its own master plan, it'll be under one umbrella, and typically that's like a 10 to 15 year cycle when these master plans are reviewed. So they're looking at the possibility now, and what I'm looking for is county board support to encourage the department to put in their master plan that they would consider a launching ramp there and doing a feasibility study so that it would be in the master plan, and we could, as time went on, go forward and look at that. Because if it's not in the plan, to get the plan opened up, to get that feasibility study done and get anything done would be very difficult. And I'll cut that if there's any questions with regard to exactly where or distances and footage and so on. I've got a lot of other information, but I got an idea you folks have got a lot of business to take care of today, and I just asked that if the county board could write a letter to the department and request that that launch ramp be included in the possibility of things that could happen in the master plan.
Okay.
Is there any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Approval of the minutes of the February 27th regular meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Chairman?
Viz.
Yeah, we skipped over supervisor response, and I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Some of the people are new on the county board and maybe don't know, but a couple of years ago, I was chairman of Airport and Parks. And George Pinney tried very hard to get a safe harbor in at Shower Park in the town of Jacksonport. And for those that were on the board for some years know that property got bought up by landowners out there and blocked us from trying to get a safe harbor in at Shower Park. The committee did try to talk to the DNR about getting in a safe harbor at the Whitefish Dune State Park. And Mr. Bowden is correct. There's safe harbor at Bailey's Harbor, and then there's nothing until you get to the Sturgeon Bay Ship Canal. So I am in support. You know, we didn't get it accomplished a couple of years ago, and now Mr. Bowden is trying to get it accomplished to get a safe harbor in at the Whitefish Dune State Park, because I don't think there's any possibility, there's no room down at Shower Park to get it done, and the next spot is the Whitefish Dune State Park. So I commend him for this effort, and I do hope it moves forward.
Thank you. Anybody else on supervisor response? Okay. All right, back to the minutes. Any changes, additions, deletions, errors, grammatical remarks, other issues with them? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Pending business updates. Number 10, resolution 2018-14 proclamation to celebrate Water Day, May 5th, 2018. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
Sure. Actually, Jill, if you don't mind, I thought just part of the explanation, I know it was discussed at the admin committee, but I'll just give you some quick background. I'm just going to show you a quick video. But in essence, there is a nonprofit that was put together through the Door County Community Foundation, and what they're looking at doing is celebrating water, as the name suggests. It's a campaign that they're hoping to start in May, and it's actually, I think, 14 months long, but they're just doing it to celebrate water for the year campaign. And what they're trying to do is do anything related to celebrating water and doing a whole series, if you see in the resolution, a whole series of either educational sessions or things that they can do to help promote water through businesses and stuff like that. So there is a little short video. I'll just let you see that if you don't mind, and then if you have any questions, I can
The
answer.
Great Lakes are the largest freshwater system on Earth. They contain 1/5 of all the surface freshwater anywhere. In Door County, over 2 million people visit each year to celebrate all things water. From land to sea, from lake to table, water is critical to our health, environment, and economy. Celebrate Water encourages people to cherish, understand, and act to protect our waters. With our talents, effort, and energy, we can bolster appreciation and awareness of our unique waters so that we might honor, restore, and preserve them. Celebrate Water. Together, we can make waves. Find out more at celebratewaterdoorcounty.com.
So again, and if on that website, they have a series of events. A lot of them I know are going to be at the Maritime Museum. They're also working with, for example, our Public Health Department. They're also working with our Land Conservation Department just on promoting the water testing program. So there's just a whole series of things. And again, the whole idea is just to celebrate both and bring awareness to both surface water and groundwater, which obviously fits within our strategic initiatives as a county. And what they are asking for is just the proclamation to actually kick off their event, which would be May 5th, 2018, and that's why it's before you today.
Susan?
I just want to add one other thing that I've heard about this initiative, which is a very good one. A gentleman named Dan Egan, who I believe is the son of a couple that's working on this in Door County, works for, I think, the Journal Sentinel in Milwaukee, and has written a book called The Life and Death of the Great Lakes. It's a very readable book. As somebody who was born on the Great Lakes and grew up hearing about the alewives and all of this, it takes the whole history of all of those different things that have been introduced to our lake and other related things. It's very readable, very, very interesting and well done. If someone has an interest, I think especially if you've been around this all your life, it's a good book to read.
Thank you. Anyone else? Laura?
Thanks. Yeah, question. Why May 5th? World Water Day is March 22nd, but why May 5th? What was that day? Just because the events are kicked off that day? Or
What they're doing is they're doing their major, or what they're considering their kickoff of their campaign, and that's the date that they picked.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, the campaign's actually a year long.
Correct.
A year.
Right. Correct. Anyone else? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next would be Resolution 2018-15, a proclamation of Travel and Tourism Week, May 6th through the 12th, 2018. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Ellen? Second by Steve.
I can give background on that if you'd like to. So again, this is something that we actually consider each year. And again, it's something that's actually used by our Visitors Bureau in terms of marketing the county. Again, what they do is they have the Travel and Tourism Week designated May 6th through the 12th. And what you'll see is in a lot of the whereases, it shows you the economic impact of tourism in our county. And again, what we're actually trying to do is just do, I guess, additional promotion for the county. And it's actually used by the Visitors Bureau in terms of this marketing and trying to promote our county in terms of the summer season kicking off. So,
Questions? If not, Linda?
Again, I know this has been in effect for several years now, the Travel and Tourism Week. Why is it so early? Because really our tourism doesn't kick off until like maybe closer to Memorial Day. Is there a reason that it's early May instead of closer to our actual tourism season and people would be more aware of it? Or is it a marketing strategy?
I know a big part of it is their marketing strategy, and I know what they're trying to do. It's part of the state of Wisconsin, tying into their program as well. I don't know if Wisconsin's Natural Week is that, but I know they need it during this week to help with their promotions and a lot of their conferences that I attend in terms of the initial kickoff. So it's all part of the kickoff for that program. So.
Anybody else? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution 2018-16, approval of the land lease and tower sale agreement with Wisconsin Public Service Corporation. Biz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion that we approve this agreement.
I'll second it.
This is something that has been discussed for a long, long time. It's surplus property, the tower on the hill, and I see the fiscal impact. The finance director has in there the $20,000 purchase price of the tower facility was not included in the revenue in our 2018 budget. The agreement also transfers the responsibility and cost of removing the tower facility at the end of its useful use by Wisconsin Public Service Corporation. Grant has been the lead in doing all the negotiating with Wisconsin Public Service, and it's gone on for a real long time, and I would ask Grant to fill in all the other information on the agreement with Wisconsin Public Service on the tower.
I'll try to give a synopsis. As Biz pointed out, we've been working on this since 2016. The sum and substance of the agreement is the land lease and tower sale will be in place for the lesser of, or the greater of 50 years of the useful life of the tower. The consideration, what the county's getting in return for transfer of the tower facility and lease of the property, which is simply an 850 square foot plot of land upon which the old tower sits. is the $20,000 purchase price for the tower facilities, and as Biz pointed out, at the end of the term of the lease or the useful life of the tower, WPS has the obligation to remove the improvements from the property and do some restoration work on the property. That's spelled out in paragraph 14 of the agreement. The reason this came about is obviously the construction of the new tower on the Brussels Hill, and the county no longer having a need for the old tower, and the property committee was faced with the decision as to whether to simply incur the expense of removing the tower and restoring the site and be done with it, or see if there was any interest among members of the public entities or private entities to partner with us to come to some other resolution. And about 2 years later, the agreement that's before you is what has been negotiated. It's been approved by the property committee.
Can I add one thing? Just one thing for information that as far as the fiscal impact, again, we're getting the $20,000 from the, I guess, as Grant described, for the property itself, for the use of the property. The one thing to also note is with this partnership, we no longer have to take down the tower, which is also a win for us. It was projected to be between $80,000 and $100,000 to actually take down a tower. So by this, we're getting the revenue, plus they're also responsible for the ultimately taking that down. So there is a pretty significant impact indirectly as well.
Questions? Linda?
If we're not actually selling the plot of land that the tower is located on, correct? We're just leasing it?
Correct.
Why would we need to allocate between real estate and personal property?
Well, that is, we're going to leave to the accountants as to minimize the transfer return fee. That's why it's blank on the agreement. There's no secret there. And from the county standpoint, it probably doesn't matter much. It matters more from WPS's standpoint. So I am perfectly willing to allow them to allocate it as they think is appropriate.
Steve?
I was just going to make the comment too that we do have in there that WPS has the ability to work with us to allow commingling on the tower. So if some other, entity would want to use space, that possibility is there.
And I will point out the single longest paragraph in the agreement is the one that has to do with signal interference, which our respective engineers helped in drafting. And that's really the biggest concern from the county standpoint, is that whatever goes on that tower doesn't interfere with any of the other towers in close proximity, in particular the new one on the Brussels Hill. So.
Anyone else? If not, we'll go to the voter board. That has passed 19 yes, 2 absent. Resolution 2018-17, County Snowmobile Trail Aid for the 2018-2019 snow season. Mr. Ostead.
I also move to pass this resolution.
Second.
Okay. This is a common thing every year that we get money from the state through an aid to help do the snowmobiles in Door County. The exact total, I don't remember. Wayne knows the amount. How much is it, Wayne? Roughly.
It'll change from year to year, $65,000 to $72,000 or so.
Okay.
Questions? David?
Just too clerical. Line 9. Exactly. Just like in finance.
Yeah.
The first "the," so hereby the approve. The should be removed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the other item is the Door County Facilities and Parks Director or their designee, subject to the oversight of the Door County Airport and Parks Committee. Now, I know that's what the title is today, but yet the Facilities and Parks Director title doesn't exist today either, right?
No,
Yeah.
the title does exist for the position, but the committees have not changed yet, so that's why I
That's
specifically
why
written
it's
that way.
written that way?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, otherwise in my mind it was just going to be its oversight committee, but, okay.
Correct.
Okay, that was it.
Ken?
One question for Mr. Solons, because I know that you are pretty involved in it. How, during the, no, I know that, I'm trying to phrase it right. How often were the trails open this year? We've had some pretty bad years lately.
Northern trails were open over a month with minimal snow.
Yeah.
There was one section in southern area that did not open at all, but the Anapee Trail section, that part was open as well, but not as much as the northern section.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we'll go to the voter board.
Oh, it's my turn not to work.
John? John? Thank you. That has passed 19 yes, 2 absent. Thank you. Next to be 2018-18, Cana Island Preservation Rehabilitation Restoration Project, authorization to proceed with Phase 3. Kathy?
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Second.
Can I give some background?
Please.
I was gonna say, I think we'll let the
Yep.
administrator do.
So let me kind of just kind of go through this and give some background to the entire board. It did go through both Airport and Parks and also Finance. But I'll try to do the semi-short version, and you can ask questions if you'd like. Short version is that we got asked as staff was to look at, I guess, proceeding with the Phase 3 and actually Phase 4 of the Cana Island Restoration Project. We did take a look at that. In short, what we did is we actually redefined Phase 3 and defined Phase 4. We kind of just modified what those are considered. And when we looked at it, it seems like to do all of it in 1 year was too much. So we're really focusing on what we consider Phase 3 for this year. If you go to page 25 of your packet, I think that's the best description of the 2 phases. So Phase 3 is defined as the following: construction of a garage by the main parking lot for use for storage. We're approximating that size to be about a two-stall garage. There'd be the design of the new interpretive center, which would be on the island. It'd be approximately 1,800 to 2,000 square feet. And then obviously that phase would also then include the construction of that new center. And then what we're also including would be the final assessment of the lightkeeper's house, which would include the preparation of construction documents. Again, we have I guess we have a study on the home, so we know what kind of needs to be done, but it's not to the level of detail where we actually could take that work out and actually bid it. So in essence, what we're asking to do is actually generate a document that we can use to actually go out for bid, whether that be next year or the year after, depending on our funding, that we could do that. To proceed with, I guess, what we consider Phase 3, we're using a number of sources of funds. The first one would be, if you look at the resolution, we're using $75,000. That is in our existing Cana Island restoration budget. There's actually about 115, but we're saving some of that money because we want to do maintenance on the site. So we're looking at using $75,000 from that. And then we're also looking at taking up to 365 from the undesignated fund balance. Again, what we're looking at is what's been done, I guess, twice in the past, where we're actually trying to, in essence, forward funds to ourselves from the undesignated fund reserve into our restoration of the project. And then what we do is we pay ourselves back. Each year we get proceeds back from the Maritime Museum as part of our partnership. Based off our calculations with Mark, we're expecting that we would be reimbursed within approximately 4 years. And that, again, has been done twice in the past. Actually, it's been set up, I believe, 3 times. Twice we went through and got paid back without a problem. Last year we also set it up, but we did not actually use funds because they were able to obtain grant funding for the project. So although we had it set up, we did not use any funds last year, if you recall. Again, so we're looking to advance at $365,000 from the undesignated fund balance. Again, we also, there's a third, I guess, area of funds. We also budgeted $100,000 within our capital improvement budget, so that's also available. So we'd use that towards the project as well, and we're hoping that that would suffice in case there is any additional costs, whether through design or construction itself. So again, in terms of the resolutions, it actually states the transfer funds of $75,000. If you look at line 33 from the Cana Island Preservation Reserve Fund, and that we'd also transfer up to the $365,000 from the undesignated fund balance. And again, this would be, in essence, paid back to ourselves as we get the money back through our partnership with the Maritime Museum.
Okay, so if I add all these numbers up, just so there's not any confusion.
Correct.
It's not a $365,000
Project. No,
project. It's a
nope.
$540,000 project.
Correct.
Up to a $540,000.
Yep, correct.
Questions? Comments? Susan?
I don't remember when we discussed this at finance, if you gave us a timeline. Do we have a sense of how long it will take to get through phase 3?
Well, I mean, the ultimate goal would be to see if we can get it done this year, but already we're, I guess,
right.
If we get approvals today, we have to go out for the RFP for design. Hopefully the design can be done very quick, and then once that's back, we'll do an RFP for actual construction. So you're probably looking at a fall construction and whether or not they could get it done. It'd be a project where they might be able to start, get the foundations in and be able to work through winter, and then have it open for next year would be my guess, just based off our timing with RFPs and approvals and all that type of thing, so.
Ken?
Yeah, I'm looking through this and I may be missing it. How much of this is being paid by the Maritime Museum?
So, yep, actually, I mean, the best way to answer it would be zero, because it's our asset, and it's our facility. So really what they're, and that's always been kind of the confusion. So we have a partnership with the Maritime Museum to actually run Cana Island for us. Through that partnership, they are able to pay for expenses and operating costs, and then once they pay for that, there's two methods of payments back to us in terms of what would be considered operating profits. That's the money that comes back into our Cana Island Restoration Fund and actually pays for the project and how we actually pay ourselves back. So technically, they're not specifically paying for the project. They're actually paying us back through that agreement in terms of the terms, and then we're using those funds then to pay for the project. They also, I guess the one thing I want to clarify too that was brought up at finance is that the Maritime Museum has also been very proactive in working with our Parks Department in writing grants. And there's been significant funding that they have been able to obtain in terms of that portion of the funding. But again, when we get those grants, you got to think of it as our property and are paying for the project and everything, and the Maritime Museum through our partnership runs that on our behalf.
Okay, I get that. When this is all done, does this get to be a point where, are we always going to be giving the money back to the Maritime Museum to run this place? Or is it going to get to the point where we're going to get something out of it and put something in our coffers that we can use for the taxpayers of the county rather than just maintaining this facility?
So Grant can clarify if I do this wrong, but in essence, when we got the property from the federal government, it was set up under what's called the land patent. And under that land patent, we can only collect funds for, in essence, maintaining and the restoration of the island itself. It was never set up to be used for funding, I guess, operations outside of the island. So even once we have this partnership, let's say we get all the restoration done, even through phase 4, we can still collect dollars through the partnership with them, but those dollars still have to go into an account that's used for Cana Island. We can't use dollars for, let's say, funding the sheriff's department or something like that. The way the land patent is set up, we can't use that as a profit center. We can use it to maintain and operate the island, but we cannot use it to fund other operations. Is that correct, Grant?
Yeah, a little, to dig down a little bit deeper, and probably nobody cares but me, but we obtain the land through the Recreation and Public Purposes Act. Whenever the U.S. government transfers property for the first time to private ownership, they do it by a land patent. And under the patent and the Recreation and Public Purposes Act, we are limited to use of the revenue generated by the island. To the island, there is a sliver of light for use for other recreation parks. We've not really explored that yet, but, you know, the door's open, but to date, we've used the revenue for the improvement at the island, which we were obligated to make by virtue of the transfer as well, because we are obligated to do the maintenance, repair, and upkeep on the improvements on the island by virtue of the transfer, so.
Okay, I get all that. We're basically paying then the Maritime Museum to run it for us. Then the funds they get, they can use for whatever purpose they deem, correct? They're not held to the same standard we are, that every dollar they take in from Kenai Island has to be used for Kenai Island. They can use it for anything else they wish.
No. The way that, and again, I think the better way of stating the agreement is that we're not paying them. We actually did a process when we searched for someone to be a partner with to help us run the facility. So we're not actually paying them to run it. They're actually running it. And through the revenues that are generated, they can actually use the funds to first pay for that, I guess, operation of what they're doing on our behalf. And then once they pay for that, anything that's above that, there's a formula that can be used to be split in terms of how those funds are used after that. So there is some, I guess, benefit in terms of the partnership of what they can use once they pay for all those expenses and once we get our part. But that's the way the agreement is set up. I know, Grant, if you want to take it further in that, but that's the way it's set up.
Yeah, it's the long and the short of it, is the revenue from the Kenai Island pays for the operating expenses of the Maritime Museum, which, as Ken pointed out, was brought about through a competitive process. We did a request for proposal, and then there is a formula and agreement about what needs to be placed into the fund, and there's actually a limit as to the amount of dollars that can go into the Kenai Island Improvement Funds. Anything above that goes into a different fund, and that's where we have kind of a little opening where we might be able to use that for other park purposes, but we've not explored that yet because we haven't reached that level. But the income that the Maritime Museum gets is limited by virtue of the agreement we have with the Maritime Museum.
Okay, so then it should be pointed out that no levy dollars are being used on this project, correct?
Correct.
That's important, because we've spent...
Well, let me just correct one thing. No levy dollars have not been used on the project, but we did budget $100,000 this year to be, and that was approved through the budget process. So we do have those dollars available. Now, whether or not we use those, depending on where this project comes in, we do have that allocated, and that was part of the tax levy for this year. But, so of that 440,000 would not be anything related to the tax levy itself.
And the primary expenditure on the part of the county has to do with resources, staff time, my time, the Parks Department's time, and kind of overseeing this whole agreement and making sure we're doing everything by Hoyle, which isn't a lot, but there is a county investment in it, just not in levy dollars.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Biz?
As far as visitors go, our two biggest gems in Door County is Kenai Island and Cave Point. It's probably why those murals are up there on the wall, Kenai Island and Cave Point County Park, because Kenai Island gets the most visitors and Cave Point is second. And we did accomplish the outside of the tower, the Kenai Island Tower, and the outside of the Keeper's House, as well as now this past year restoring the privy, the oil house, and the garage. So we need these other projects done in phase 3 so that they can empty out the keeper's house to do the inside of the keeper's house and the inside of the tower. You know, we've got it protected from the weather because all the outside work is done. So now we're going to be zeroing in on the inside work. So, you know, I'm supportive of this move to have that money available so we can move forward with these phase 3 and 4.
One more thing, this isn't legal, just we've neglected to mention, is with the passage of time, the condition of the improvements on the island will get worse, as well as the cost of construction will increase. And I know that was part of the mindset when this was brought forward, is we have the resources to get it done now. We have a proven track record that we can have those dollars reimbursed through the existing arrangements with the Maritime Museum. And on balance, it made more sense to go forward sooner rather than later with with this next phase of the project. So.
Ken?
Yeah, I just want to note that my questions were just for clarity. I'm in favor of this. Okay, I'm not against it or anything. I'm for it. I just wanted to clarify.
Steve?
Grant kind of touched on it, but everybody just needs to realize that the chances of there being maintenance money to do other things outside of that are slim, because this is going to be an ongoing. As soon as we get done with phase 4 or phase 5, there's going to be something to do that we worked on in phase 1, because these buildings are going to continue to need servicing. So we're going to need a maintenance account to keep everything going.
Anyone else? If not, we'll go to the voter board.
Oh, mine is. Well, try it again. There we go.
That has passed a vote of 18 yes, 1 no, 2 absent. Thank you.
I didn't have to talk.
Took care of it. Resolution 2018-19, appropriations for breakwater repairs at the George K. Pinney County Park. I'll start off with Kathy, who can then send it to Dan, who can then send it to Ken.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve 2018-19.
Second.
Biz?
I'm just seconding her motion.
Okay. Just for note, on line 16, there was a typing error, so it should be 2637 in terms of the grant acceptance. And that refers back then to page 27 for that other resolution. So I just want to clarify that. But again, this for quick background, at George Pinney Park, if you're familiar with the site at the break wall, and also there's a sidewalk there that extends out, there's some issues in terms of erosion that occurred over time, obviously with the amount of ice in that area. It was identified as a project. We took it through Airport and Parks. We did go through the RP process and got bids for the project. Again, what you'll see is Wayne was able to get a grant that we did accept as part of the matching offset. You'll see that the new project cost actually came in under what we expected, but it was for $27,000. So with that, we're requesting that we use the balance then that we need of $24,363 from the boat launch fee account. And that would allow us to proceed with repairs right away this spring, which would be helpful for us. And I don't know if there's any other questions, but we do need, since it's unbudgeted project, even though we have the funds, we need to bring it to county board for approval.
Questions? Linda?
I would just like to say that this park is really utilized year-round. Ice fishermen on and off the ice, boaters, fishermen in the summer. So it is a real asset to our county, and we should do all we can to keep it in good condition.
Anyone else? If not, we'll go to the voter board. That has passed on a vote of 19 yes, 0 no, and 2 absent.
Yeah.
Resolution 2018-20, transfer of non-budgeted funds to the purchase and installation of North Point Suite Compass Core software for Door County Operation Fresh Start program.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
I can give an explanation if you'd like.
Yep.
Okay, so you guys will be sick of me by the end of the meeting, but I'll try to be concise. I didn't, the sheriff's not here, so I can just cover it really quick. So again, if you're familiar with Operation Fresh Start, that's an initiative that we have going on right now with Tammy in our jail. And again, she's looking at a series of programs to help with, I guess, getting individuals, once they leave jail, to be productive in society, not have to have them come back. Under this program, it's a program that allows them to go and continue on with employment by doing what's called a pre-trial. So in other words, if they come into the system, they get assessed, and if they qualify, they can work with the judges, and then they can be released on the program and before they come back for court. To do this program, it does require the use of the software because as through the jail, whenever they're audited, they need to actually document their decisions. And what the software, which you can see, it would be a cost of $18,535. And this would be the first year expenditures. And then after that, there'd be an annual expenditure of about $5,000, I think $350. That'd be an annual, I guess, occurring cost for the software. It was discussed at finance in terms of that. There is the possibility that that annual cost, I guess, could be recovered through, I guess, the program itself in terms of how that works through with the judges. But worst case scenario, I always say the worst case is that you have to pay for that subscription then going forward. But again, the thought with the program getting off the ground is that we'd work both with the judges and the jail to make sure that the program is successful, and hopefully we can generate the revenue necessary to pay for the software. One of the questions that did come up at finance and also at law enforcement was this, for example, if they get released under this program, there might be certain programs that they either have to test for or they might even have some items that they wear. Those are all items that the individual pays for themselves as part of this program. So I guess what we consider the incidentals that they would be required to use would be paid for directly by the individual using them, so there's no cost that way. Again, for the project, in terms of where we're getting the funds, it'd be from the Inmate Trust Account Reserve Fund. And this fund is required to be used on, I guess, what we consider services or improvements for inmates. So it actually applies for this. So it would not be coming out of our tax levy, but it'd actually be coming out of that account to pay for it for this first year. Hopefully I covered that in detail for you.
Questions? Steve?
Do we know what the ongoing maintenance cost is for that program?
Yeah, that's about $5,350.
Okay,
Correct.
so that's it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I guess I'd just like to state, Mr. Chair, Lieutenant Sternert has done an outstanding job putting this together. She works very diligently between the courts and human services to make sure our inmates are being treated with respect and with respective knowledge of education. So this is part of that program, making it work collaboratively between the court systems and the jail system. So this is a good project.
Great. Anyone else? Susan?
I would just add that I second what John said. This is a very good program, and this allows us to save money on people in jail. It allows the courts to monitor better, and it allows the people who have been, who are waiting for the court not to lose their jobs because they're in jail and stay with their families and so on. So.
Great. We'll go to voter board. That has passed on a vote of 19 yes, 0 no, and 2 absent. Sticking with the criminal justice system, resolution dissolving the Community Justice Coalition and establishing a Door County Criminal Justice Collaborating Council. Could I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Thanks, John.
Second. The judge.
Yes, please.
I'll the judge do this one. I'll take a break.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Most of you, I think, know me. I'm Dave Weber. I'm a circuit court judge in Branch 2. I had met with the administration committee last week about this resolution. This is to establish what we call a criminal justice collaborating council. What a handful, you know, what a mouthful, I should say. But it's just simply to formalize what we've been doing for many years, and that is to meet, the judges meet with law enforcement, the DA, the public defender, people from the Department of Corrections, and discuss criminal justice issues, any sort of issues that are facing us. We get together, I think right now, about every 6 weeks, and we do this informally. We want to make this a formal committee, primarily because that enables us to get funding through grants. And the main impetus as to why we're doing this now is because many of us feel the time has come for us to get a treatment court in our justice system here in Door County. One of the things I've learned in the last year and a half since I've been on this job is that there are treatment courts in almost every other county in this state. And we want to try to get one set up here in Door County. The research tells us that they're cheaper than putting people in jail. They're more effective. So, but in order to get funding for such a program, to have the money to do it, we need to have a formal committee that's going to make an application for a grant. So now the CJCC, just what we need, another acronym, is broader than the treatment court. You know, we're going to meet in a formal way, and then as I envision it, there will be a subcommittee under the CJCC which will administer the treatment court. The CJCC really doesn't have any authority. I don't know if you have the bylaws that I drafted, the proposed bylaws. It doesn't have any independent authority, but it'll be made up of people that does have authority, the judges, the DA, obviously the sheriff, the chief of police, and the like. None of the members on the CJCC will be compensated. That's an issue that came up a week ago. We're really just doing it to formalize what we've already done. We have a really good informal working relationship now with everybody, but this will just formalize the process, and it'll enable us hopefully to get some money. Any questions? Yes?
Laura?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, the community collaboration part, what examples can you give for this being a community collaboration? Is that like maybe outside people coming in to help fund some of this work that might be done? Or I see that 10 out of 12 people of memberships are county related or elected officials. So is there examples that you could share for that?
Yeah, so just for example, yesterday, Colleen Nordine, we had some downtime. We were talking about the whole issue of people owing financial obligations. People that go through the criminal justice system are given fines. They're given surcharges as long as my arm. Many of them are repeat people, and it's frequently the case where I'm fining somebody, assessing costs, that my clerk turns to me and says, well, they already have $2,000 or $3,000 outstanding, in which case I start a colloquy with them, how are they going to pay it back? Well, we got to talking, you know, some counties, they automatically issue some jail time right away if they can't pay it within a certain amount of time. That gives them incentive to pay those fines. We don't do that in Door County. But that would be an issue for the CJCC because it involves the jail, because if we're going to incarcerate people, that's additional expense. It's going to involve law enforcement because we're going to have to go out and apprehend these people if they don't pay. That's a discussion not just for the judges or the DA. Certainly we would be included, but that would be a discussion that everybody would have together to see if this would be financially, you know, would make sense financially. That's just an example of something that we would talk about at a CJCC meeting. Anything that involves law enforcement, how we're doing OWI warrants. Most of you probably know that, you know, a lot of times people get arrested for OWI and they refuse to give a blood draw. That means that they have to call one of the judges in the middle of the night to get OWI warrant. Well, there's software pertaining to these things. There's issues that arise technically how we do this. There are formal requirements. Are we meeting those requirements? If we sustain a challenge to one of these things, that's the sort of thing that we discuss in a collaborating way. Now, when we talk about the treatment court, by all means, the way it's set up, we want people from the community, certain entities from the community, maybe Family Dynamic Solutions, that's an independent entity that might be involved in counseling. I don't think we have any, I call them halfway houses, but overnight treatment facilities in the community right now. We're hoping that that changes. But that would certainly be a entity that we would want at the table in a collaborating way with us to discuss how we, you know, approach treatment. Obviously, you know, the courts don't administer the treatment. They just monitor it. So I hope that answers your question. We need all of these people at the table. Right now, we meet every 6 weeks or so just to discuss any sorts of issues that we're having in the criminal justice system. That could be from law enforcement. It could be problems we're having as judges. You know, people not being prepared, people not showing up for things. Security. I know there's a separate security entity that, in fact, we have a meeting this noon, but there are security issues that we might have that we discuss. Any sort of issue that would face law enforcement would be potentially a subject at the CJCC meeting. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
John?
Judge, also, I think this gives the courts, law enforcement, and everybody involved with that, human resources, et cetera, human services, I should say, a better handle on our inmates on the recidivism rate. This is really designed to help keep in touch with them, get them on their way to being a better citizen and not have to come back to jail again without having any kind of ability to go out and be a good person other than just coming back and spending their 48 months in jail or whatever, you know.
Exactly. In the resolution that you just passed, the program that Lieutenant Sterner just you know, brought to the resolution is something the judges and the DA have talked about. But that would be another subject for the CJCC, you know, earmarking the types of people that we want to get out of the jail, that we want to release pre-trial, or excuse me, pre-conviction. You know, once somebody is in the jail, they're the subject of the jail, and they're released on Huber, and they qualify based on their own criteria. But now we're talking about releasing them prior to sentencing, because they, you know, the statistics show that certain people do much better when they're released, when they can retain their jobs, when they can be productive in the community. But that would be the type of thing that we would discuss at a CJCC meeting. What kinds of people are we going to earmark to release? You know, it's not going to be everybody, obviously, but on the other hand, we don't want to retain people. We do not want to incarcerate people just because they can't pay. If we can get them out on an ankle bracelet or some sort of monitoring and get them, the worst thing that happens to people, they get on a bond that they can't afford, and they're in jail for 2 weeks. And when they get out of jail, when they finally post, or we reduce the bond, they've lost their job. Whatever tenuous connections they have to their family, to the extent that they have family, are gone. They have no significant others. These people are lost. We want to avoid that to the extent that we can, but that's the type of thing that we would discuss. What types of people are we going to release? Under what conditions? Are we going to require them to pay us back to fund these programs? Because rather than making them post cash on a bond of $3,000 or $5,000, Maybe we ask them to reimburse us for the ankle bracelet. And they're working, so they're paying the Huber fees. This could be very economically wise for us to do, and it's better for them. But that's the type of thing that we would discuss.
Megan?
Yeah.
Am I also correct to think that along with this collaborating council, that there would be entities from the community involved on the non-justice side of things, or I should say, like, not as direct contacts, such as the court system or the jail or law enforcement? Is that correct or not?
Non-criminal?
Like services and folks that would be involved in some of this decision-making process that are in.
So for instance, I have in the bylaws, and I don't know if you have them, a representative of a substance abuse treatment provider selected by the majority, a representative of private social services. We're going to have representatives of the Department of Human Services involved, obviously. I don't know if that answers your question.
I was kind of piggybacking off of Laura's question regarding community collaboration. Because, and I see that there's a need for a strong focus on the logistics of it, but looking at the human aspect, I just wanted to know a little bit more about how this committee would be working within the community on the front end.
Well, I've included a catch-all, and I don't want to limit anything at this point especially. Additional members may be appointed by the council as the council deems appropriate. Certainly, if we can get input from any other sector of our community, that's going to help those people that are making decisions that affect the criminal justice system. We're welcome to, we're open to that by all means. And if you have suggestions for us, I'd be more than happy to hear them.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Judge Weber.
Just one more thing, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'd like to add. I do support this project. I've sat in on several of the CJCC meetings. It's very interesting to hear other counties and agencies involved in this, coming up with different solutions, different ideas of how to help our inmate clientele, so to say. It is a way of generating money or getting money from grants in other such cases out there. So it helps us in the long run. But I think our major goal here is to stop the recidivism rate, find better ways of dealing with our potential inmates, besides just boarding them and housing them and spending taxpayer money without any kind of recourse with them at all. So I do support this.
Thank you. Biz?
I agree with Supervisor Cook. This is a good thing to try the counseling instead of incarceration, because if we stay on the path we're on, we'll probably be looking at putting an addition on our jail to have enough housing for people. So I'm supportive of it as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, we will do this by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next item, this was on the amended agenda. Resolution 2018-22, approve the fiber lateral agreement with Lawrence University. I'll just add that we talked about this at the last admin committee meeting, although nothing was in place at the time. Since then, Lawrence came to the county and they need to move forward quicker than what we originally anticipated, so I sponsored this to be on the agenda for today.
Check, we got a motion first? Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second.
So I can just cover this really quick. It's been discussed before you. It actually originally came up through our Technical Services Committee. Again, part of our fiber backbone, we're able to, I guess, have other entities join on. It was presented, actually, if you recall, Jason Rauer was here, and he actually talked about working with different agencies, and we actually specifically mentioned Lawrence and NWTC probably being the first ones that came up. And again, in this case, just as David has mentioned, we had the agreements pretty much ready to go with Lawrence, and after our meeting, they said that they're ready to go. But again, when we discussed it, we looked at these as intergovernmental agreements, so that's why, in this case, it would have came through the admin committee. That's why I asked David to sponsor it. But again, what it does is allows them to move forward, and again, it's I guess a similar agreement that we already have established with other entities such as the Sturgeon Bay School District and also Southern Door and also Sebastopol.
Questions? Linda?
The agreement is for 18 years. Is that the typical length of agreement?
The way we structured the agreement is it matches our.
She caught the mistake. The agreement's actually, I was commenting to somebody this morning, it should actually be 15 years. I was wondering if anybody would catch that.
Right.
And it has successive 5-year terms.
Correct.
Well, 15 years is pretty long too, so that would be a standard, normal term.
Correct.
Well, what we've tried to do is we've tried to match this up with the agreement we have with Insight. I guess that's the answer is, so all these, anything that is going to attach to our fiber optic lateral can only exist as long as our agreement with Insight is in place. And that's what we're trying to do, is to get the agreements to match up in terms of time, because without Insight allowing us to ride on a fiber optic backbone, we wouldn't have this opportunity. So,
Any other questions? If not, by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next will be ordinances. Report, amendment to the zoning map of Bailey's Harbor. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to accept the report for an amendment to the zoning map of Bailey's Harbor.
I'll second that.
And the explanations there on lines 11 to 13, the rezoning request is being sought to establish agricultural, greenhouse, commercial floriculture and/or horticulture, and roadside stand land uses on the subject parcel. Their roadside stand land uses are not permitted uses in the existing single-family residential zoning district.
Any questions? This is to accept the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next would be ordinance 2018-05, amendment to the zoning map of Bailey's Harbor. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I make a motion to accept the mandatory zoning ordinance 2018-05 pertaining to the prior report.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Questions or comments? Since this is an ordinance, we'll be going to the voter board. That has passed 18 yes, 1 no, 2 absent. Next to be a report and comprehensive zoning ordinance text amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I had made a mistake on that one. I see it was just Mr. Enical. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to accept the text amendment to Door County comprehensive zoning ordinance.
Second.
Questions? Discussion?
Well, the explanation is the majority of the proposed amendments change the county's conditional use permit process requirements to match those required by the state due to 2017 Wisconsin Act 67. The remaining amendments clean up various sections of the ordinance, but do not change the interpretation or administration of the sections in question.
Questions or comments? If not, by voice vote to accept the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next will be ordinance 2018-06, comprehensive zoning ordinance text amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the mandatory zoning ordinance 2018-06 pertaining to the prior report.
I'll second it.
Questions, discussion? Kathy?
I understand that it's just housekeeping type of thing, correct?
Yes.
I have a question. Maybe Mariah will answer this one.
That's why she's here, Mr. Chairman.
answer?
So this has to do with the Act 67 cleanup for conditional use?
Most of this, yes.
Most of it? Okay. Has there been any significant changes as a result of Act 67 that will inflect upon or change how we handle conditional uses?
Yes, is the short answer. The law has completely changed. Technically, the county is required to issue conditional use permits if the applicant can show that they're going to meet all of the ordinance requirements and any conditions that the committee might want to set. But they do need to be providing substantial evidence regarding each of the topics. So there's going to be almost a bigger burden on applicants than there used to be as far as what information they have to provide. But if they do provide that information, we're essentially required to issue the permit.
Okay, so if I take that one step further, anybody who would be testifying for or against the conditional use condition would also have to provide substantial evidence.
Correct. So people can't just show up anymore and speculate about whether or not it's going to cause a problem for their neighborhood or affect their property values or things like that. They would need to show substantial evidence regarding one of the topics that the RPC can consider. And if that substantial evidence that they provide conflicts with what the applicant has provided, then the Resource Planning Committee is going to have to determine which they think is more relevant or plausible or recent or applicable.
Ken?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it should be noted that the committee has anguished over what substantial evidence means. Because to one person, what substantial is not to another. So we may need Grant's assistance for a while when this.
There is, as part of these amendments, we are putting in a definition of substantial evidence, which Grant has provided, but as Mr. Fisher indicates, it's not always going to be black and white to figure that out. Basically, at the very least, it needs to be facts and information that people are providing from now on, rather than just, yep, it's going to be fine, or no, it's not going to be fine.
The definition of substantial evidence, which is from the statute, is interesting because it tells you what it is not. It's on the bottom of page 42 of your packet, is facts and information other than merely personal preference or speculation directly pertaining to the requirements and conditions an applicant must meet to obtain a conditional use permit, and that reasonable persons would accept in support of a conclusion. So the law was enacted in response to what the legislature perceived was public comment coming from members of the public of a municipality that went to the county and said, we simply don't like this. And the county said, well, if the town and the town members don't like it, then we're not going to grant it. And so we were stuck with this. What's important, I think, to your question is substantial evidence starts with the application. There has to be substantial evidence in the application and the whole way through the proceeding with decisions made, all tie into substantial evidence. So it represents, I think, a sea change in the way that things have been done.
And one of the things that Grant just mentioned reminded me that this is going to be true for the town's input as well. So typically what we often get from the towns is, yes, they like the project, or no, they don't like the project. And their opinions aren't going to be given any more weight than anybody else's. They are also going to need to provide substantial evidence as to why they think something should or shouldn't be granted, or a particular topic isn't being addressed well enough.
Susan?
The department, land use department, has spent quite a bit of time, I think, and shared it with RPC of how they're helping the towns and villages negotiate this and how to inform the citizens so that they don't just come in the same way they always have and then it isn't going to hold any weight. So they've tried to go out of their way to make this easier on the towns and, you know, the municipalities in dealing with it. But it's going to be an interesting process.
Thank you. David?
At the RPC meeting, I kept thinking of several different projects through the years that have come forward that I quite honestly, with the new rules, would have been fairly difficult for some of them to get passed.
I think that's true of lots of them, probably.
Very difficult. And what the legislature may have felt was an effort to mitigate the opposition concerns that of the touchy-feely issues has actually made it more difficult for the people applying also, considerably, at least in our county.
And one more, we're all still trying to figure this out. There's enough ambiguity in the statute that there's going to be some case law that comes out of this. Also, I happen to be the poor unfortunate soul that was selected by my group to give a presentation statewide. I'm going to drag Mariah, one of our zoning administrators, with me coming up in May. But honestly, it's hard to tell what the impact's going to be on the ground, because I think there's areas of the statute, as they will be applied by county zoning committees and boards of adjustment, that are going to be challenged in court. And we're not going to know what the true effects are for probably 3-4 years.
Thanks, Mariah.
You're welcome.
If there's not any other questions, we'll go to the voter board. That is passed, vote 19 yes, 0 no, 2 absent.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can I add one more comment to the discussion? It doesn't affect our vote. I think a lot of us have been frustrated, particularly the RPC, but perhaps others. This was another example of a law that got passed without going to the municipalities or the counties and asking for input as to how it would affect them. It was a quickly done and not the way we like to see the legislature do business.
Report, Shoreland zoning text amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm laughing because I have to say, once again, I agree with Supervisor Coholt on this. She's exactly right.
Mark those down, Susan.
Yeah, I did. It's going to go in my diary. You can autograph it.
I'm scaring myself to walk in that happening that I agree with her lately. I think I'm going to the dark side. I don't know.
I think it's the light side.
Anyway, that being said, I'd like to make a motion to accept the text amendment report to the Door County Shoreland zoning ordinance.
Second.
Are you sure?
I think so.
Would you like to explain it?
Oh, well, the explanation is the Resource Planning Committee petitions to amend the ordinance to add a section pertaining to allowing the reconstruction of illegally established structures in the shoreland areas. The amendment is required by state law. The remaining amendments replace planning with Land Use Services Department. And Mariah is here that she can give a more detailed explanation if anybody needs one.
There really isn't much more to add. We're already required by state law to allow the reconstruction of any structure that has been authorized by variance that would otherwise be considered to be too close to the water, and certain non-conforming structures, which are what most people call grandfathered. So if something was built before zoning that's too close to the water, we're required to allow those to be rebuilt. Now we are also required to allow illegal structures that are too close to the water that have been there for more than 10 years to be rebuilt as well.
Any questions? By voice vote to accept the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 2018-07, Shoreline text amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And finally, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the amendatory zoning ordinance 2018-07.
Second.
Discussion or questions? David.
More of a comment. It continues to be frustrating along Sue's comments to watch the state level government choose to make changes to sensible regulations that fit a particular category rather than fitting the rest of the state completely. For, this 10-year replacement issue is ridiculous. It just.
We've been doing fine in the dark.
It was better in the dark.
Yeah.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board, please.
That's why you should be doing lights.
That has passed 19 yes, 0 no, 2 absent.
Yeah, it showed up better.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we have a couple of special reports, recognition and returning board members, Mark Miller and Don City. We don't usually know in advance when somebody's not going to be here at our next meeting. We usually find out after the fact. We pass a resolution and sign our signatures and say nice things about them.
Really?
Most of the time. Today we have an opportunity to thank somebody with the existing sitting board before there are any changes after next month's election. And Don is not here, so he will have to wait and get his after we all sign it and say nice things about him next month. But in this case, Mark is here, so Mark, I'd just like to make a few comments and read a little bit from the proposed resolution recognizing you next month, and for us to personally be able to say thank you while you're still here in front of us, with us. Mark was first appointed to the Door County Board of Supervisors in April of 2005. He was elected to subsequent terms and served through April 16, 2018, for a total of 13 years on the board. He represented Supervisor District 12, which encompasses city wards of wards 11, 12, 15 through 17, and 28. And during his tenure, he was a very busy guy, as we all know, heavily involved in IS, technical services, human services. He served on many committees and boards, including the Airport and Parks, the Board of Health, CCS, CCSP Coordinating Committee, Children's COP Advisory Committee, Communications Advisory Technical Support Committee, CATS, Community Programs, Emergency Services, Finance, Human Services, Information Systems, Lakeshore CAP, Law Enforcement, Museum and Archives, Resource Planning, Senior Services, Senior Resource Commission, Social Services, and the Ad Hoc W2 Steering Committee. He also served at various times as Chairman of Community Programs, Social Services, Human Services, Museum Archives, Communications Advisory Technical Subcommittee, Children's COP Advisory Committee, CCS and CCST Coordinating Committee, and the Ad Hoc W2 Committee. So I just want to offer you our sincere thanks personally, as we're all here, and commend you for everything you've done for the county in these last, how many years? 13 years.
13 of them, yep.
So thank you very much, Mark.
Oh, yeah, that's what I heard. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You certainly deserve it. Any other comments?
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody that I worked with over the years, all the different supervisors that are here now and the ones before. And I also wanted to say one thing. Don't forget the employees that work for the County of Door. If you see one in the hallway, stop, talk to them, ask them how it's going. You'll learn a lot that way. Thank you.
Thank you. New business, oral committee reports. Anybody have an oral committee report on me? Review committee minutes, discuss vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements, the next regular county board meeting will be April 17th at 9 a.m. In addition, each of your students should have received the committee interest and preference form. Would ask that you fill it out and get it back to Lori as soon as possible. The next new board, as it's seated, will take a look at this, and this is what we'll use to kind of go through, look at committee preferences. Since at the next board there will be a seating arrangement, we would ask that you also clean out your drawers at your current seat assignment prior to the next county board. Do you want Susan?
There are some changes in committees that have happened through various discussions. I wonder if Ken might, or you might want to comment on some of these different names so people are clear on.
Sure. I mean, there's probably the two primary changes is going to be facilities and parks. Actually, there's three changes. So obviously, facilities and parks, as it name implies, that includes, I guess, what was formerly known as property, and obviously our parks department. That's now called facilities and parks. The other one is obviously our highway, although highway is just remaining highway, but it also includes airport underneath that as well. And then the other change is what we're calling, what we're suggesting to call public safety. That will include what was formerly known as law enforcement, emergency services, and then we're also going to have emergency management. So that'd be the primary change for that as well.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, and what used to be IS is now technical services?
That is correct. Yeah. I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out as well. And again, our intention is those that are, that in order, if you could have these back by next week, it would help. And then what we'll do is after the election, we'll send out these interest surveys to the individuals that are also, will be on the board so that they can fill it out as well, so.
Where is this?
The median per diem code is 723.
Can I take one other?
Sure, please.
Just one other quick thing just to think about. It'll be something that the board will take up at the April meeting, but we did put out a flyer that was put out, I'm assuming most of you have it from WCA. This is the one thing I wanted to point out is that there's multiple locations you could go, but for the location that's closest to us will be on May 10th. But again, we'll be looking for, I guess, who would we want to attend. But I wanted to put that out in front of you so that way you can think about it. So in April, just because of the timeline involved, we're going to have some quick decisions made in terms of registrations and so forth.
With that, Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there's no further business to be transacted, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
What's the code?
7:23.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
It was 7:23.
7:23?